Hey, if you've struggled to put on muscle, if you don't know what it takes to put on 1 to 2 pounds of muscle each week, I'm here to tell you that you will learn how to do just that with this episode. There's no reason that you should be able to put on 1 to 2 pounds of muscle and have that muscle be applicable to the basketball court. We're going to teach you what functional hypertrophy means. And we're going to teach you the practices and the protocols to use in the weight room to put on muscle, not just to get bigger, but to get faster and to get more explosive and to improve your vertical jump and to improve your durability so that you can last throughout the season injury free. This episode is all about that, and I hope you enjoy it. I hope you apply those practices so you don't get pushed around on the basketball court and you develop the body that will help you be a more dominant basketball player. Enjoy this episode, and we'll catch you later. All right, we are streaming live on Facebook, Elite Training for Basketball podcast, episode number 16.
Woo!
Starting to develop and get a little library going here of episodes. Coach Sean, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. How are we doing?
I'm good. I'm excited to talk about hypertrophy. My beard has experienced some great hypertrophy in the last few weeks. Looks like yours has too.
I haven't touched it all month.
Yeah, it's been about a month for me. And again, the grays are coming through. Hopefully I look a little wiser with that, but it is what it is. Hypertrophy, man, it's such a huge topic. What have I like to start just talk a little bit about our own training. And, we're both males and we, typical males like to, your arms are never big enough. Your chest is never, exactly. Your arms are never big enough. Your chest is never big enough. What has been your training experience personally with hypertrophy? I'm curious to know myself because I don't even know.
Yeah, that's really funny. I would say the middle of my career, and obviously in high school and before I even got into strength and conditioning, all I really knew how to do was hypertrophy, was make it really hard, make it suck, and the muscles will grow. And that's pretty much, I think, what everyone thinks of is like, how hard can I push myself to make these things grow? And I think I did that for a long time. I got into strength and conditioning and I started kind of adjusting how I train. I started doing more strength, a little bit more like power exercises, but you don't never really lose that kind of grind to just, get the veins popping and kind of see yourself pushing beyond what you think is comfortable. And I think now in my later adult life, I spend more time doing lower reps with higher weight to induce more of like a sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. I'm sorry, take that back. More like a myofibrillar hypertrophy. So I get more of my type 2 fibers activated and I get growth through the type 2s as opposed to growth through the type 1 fibers. And it served me well. I tend to keep the injuries down because I'm not doing so much repetition. And that's tend to serve me pretty well. And you can never go wrong with strong.
You can never go wrong with strong. I like that. You actually mentioned my shirt earlier. It looks like the Stranger Things symbol, but it says Stronger Things. Most people miss that. Oh,
I love it.
Yeah, me and you both, man. We love being strong. We love teaching strength. But we got to talk about hypertrophy today. Myself, a couple things come to mind, and I didn't even know I was going to ask that question. So this is just off the cuff. But I remember graduated high school at 175, and I was 6'3", maybe 4, on a good day, and I was always like, Dad, I want to gain, and I didn't know anything about training back then. And so, he's like, you'll fill out eventually, you'll get bigger. And then, throughout college, I put on a few pounds. I think I graduated around 190. And then when I started playing professionally, I was around 200. And then one summer, it kind of, all the pieces fell together. And again, still didn't know what I was doing. I was probably 23, 4 years old. And I weighed in at 217, and my coach is like, you're already white and slow. You don't need to be any slower. You look like a tight end. Drop your weight. So I went back down to 205, but now I'm sitting around 220. Over Christmas, I was closer to 230. Thank you very much. Really the weight there, and I'm comfortable with where I'm at. As a guy, you always want, like I said, bigger arms, bigger chest, whatever it may be, but I think the days for me of chasing hypertrophy are over. Although, and now though I'm trying to just maintain, I'm trying to keep the muscle on. So that's kind of my hypertrophy story, just off the cuff. But let's get into it, shall we?
I'm in.
Yeah. So let's just talk real quick right off the bat, practicality things, and then we'll go dig a little deeper into the weeds. How much muscle do you need as a basketball player? How can more muscle help you on the basketball court? Obviously, first things come to mind. Gosh, I think of guys like LeBron. I think of guys like Zion Williamson, Shaquille O'Neal. These guys who are almost immovable objects, and yet they are still quick and fast and powerful and explosive. And I know not everybody is genetically gifted like those three names I just said, but from a standpoint of, are you too lean? Are you too skinny? Yeah, some extra muscle can definitely help. The other side of the coin, what I'm thinking about is the durability aspect throughout the season. So, Zion takes a lot of beef, and LeBron did too early in his career, and he's proven that he can sustain a season at the weight that he has. But a lot of guys, a lot of girls tend to lose, 5 kilos, 10, 15 pounds throughout the course of a basketball season. So just having that muscle on your body can help you be more durable, can help you be less injury prone, and as well as just help you to get through the season. Is that the same? I know you were a rugby player in football. Was there a lot of guys losing weight throughout the season?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty common as you go from off season where you're not practicing quite as much, you're more lifting weight. And then as you shift the focus from the weight room more to the field skills, I think it's pretty common. Most teams I know tend to stop lifting during season. So they kind of stop doing that maintenance on the muscle hypertrophy. And so I think it's pretty common for most athletes to lose weight during season if they're not lifting during season, or at least trying to maintain or doing some type of weight room activity to maintain like those type 2 muscle activations and what have you.
Yeah, that's important. So why can't most basketball players grow? Very easy. Too many calories out, not enough calories in. That's really the bottom line with you basketball players as you go throughout the season and you're burning, or as you are going through the off season trying to grow and you simply can't do it. I just made a video for y'all in the group, for those of you who asked for it, about gaining mass. And it's not that difficult. I say it's simple, but it's not easy. And those are two totally different things. The three building blocks are: you have to train hard, you have to eat enough food, and you have to sleep enough. And if you do those three things, you'll grow. It's quite simple.
It's the Goku philosophy.
It's a what?
Like Goku from Dragon Ball Z. All he does is train, eat, and sleep, and that's literally it. It's all you got to do.
I will have to look up the Goku philosophy after this. We have a Dragon Ball Z reference. First time, episode 16. I love it. You're a few years younger than me. You may have been were you a Dragon Ball Z kid growing up?
I mean, who doesn't like Dragon Ball Z?
So yeah, eat enough, which we'll get into a little bit later. We'll get into those 3 pillars, but that's a big reason why basketball players can't grow. Sean, do you want to start in talking about functional hypertrophy and how it makes you a better athlete, or do you want me to jump in with that as well? I feel like I'm talking about it at the beginning.
No, go ahead and take that, and I'll just kind of peep in when I think we need to.
Yeah. So another thing I said we would talk about, and we'll get into it deeper, but what is functional hypertrophy? How does it make you a better athlete? We're going to go into more deep the rep ranges and how they influence muscle hypertrophy versus muscle strength. But functional hypertrophy is typically that 6 to 8 rep range. It's that sweet spot of, 6 and below or 5 and below is really you're getting into that strength. And then 8 to 12, that moderate rep range, you're really getting into that traditional hypertrophy or growth zone. And so 6 to 8 is kind of right there in the middle where it's touching on the strength side, but it's also touching on the hypertrophy side. And the hypertrophy that you get is actually functional in that you are being able to use it on the basketball court. So functional hypertrophy in that 6 to 8 rep range will allow you to grow, assuming the load on the bar is accurate, but it will allow you to grow at the same time be able to use and apply that muscle practically on the basketball court. So you won't get too big, you won't get too maximally strong, if you can look at it like that. And so typically functional hypertrophy in that 6 to 8 rep range is a really good sweet spot for me. And I use it a lot for my athletes, and it seems to work really, really well.
Yeah, with the functional hypertrophy, for me, it's hypertrophy growing the type 2 muscle fibers. So as athletes, our type 2 muscle fibers are responsible for speed, strength, and power. And when we're growing hypertrophy, we can actually hypertrophy type 1 muscle fibers or type 2 muscle fibers. So with the functional hypertrophy, as we work our way down the scale of reps, we're actually growing our type 2 muscle fibers, which are the ones that are responsible for speed, strength, and power. So, the adage is mass moves mass. And so if you have a little bit more muscle mass, you can move your body a little bit more, but it's also that muscle mass that's made out of the function. When we say functional for athleticism, it's I have more growth in the muscle fibers that allow me to produce force explosively. So we're growing the muscle fibers that are more closely related with speed, strength, and power adaptations on the court. So you see a lot of bodybuilders, and they're typically in that like really high rep range and like the 20 plus 15 to 20, and they're doing, burnout reps. That's a different kind of hypertrophy. It affects a different muscle fiber, and it affects a different system on the body. And those are going to be more the type 1 muscle fiber activation, which is your low threshold. Like all your postural muscles are type 1. A lot of your support muscle groups are type 1 muscle fibers, but a lot of your big compound muscles, like most of your quads, your glutes, pecs, backs, lats, all the big compound muscles are typically made out of type 2 muscle fibers. And so we're talking functional hypertrophy. We're talking about growing the muscle fibers that are related to sport action.
You mentioned bodybuilding, and we did a episode on that a while back, and bodybuilding and the philosophies there have really infiltrated and have really influenced the way athletes train. And so we talked about unlearning bodybuilding. And one thing that I think athletes need to go away from is what you just said, is those higher rep ranges. And I'm telling you, so many basketball players, they're training throughout the season and they're getting bigger, they're getting stronger, they're getting more explosive. And then the season comes, and I don't know how many, 80%, I mean, the overwhelming majority of people, basketball players, have told me, when I get to the basketball season, I bring the weight back and I put the reps up and I start doing 10s and 12s and 15s. And I'm like, just want to pull my hair out. Like, you just worked and developed your body to this point of being strong and explosive. And that's what you need on the basketball court. And now you're going to go try and train like a bodybuilder during the season. You're going to get slower. You're going to do a whole lot of things that you don't want to do to your body. So I'm glad you brought that up. Another thing about bodybuilding and why I don't like it for basketball players, even though they are big, okay, power lifters as well are also big. So think about bodybuilders. Bodybuilders are on stage. They got these big muscles. They're posing. Power lifters, and they do the higher rep ranges. These bodybuilders, typically, they'll do 12s, 15s, 20s, 30s. They're going for as much muscle damage as possible. Power lifters, and they take short rest periods. They're driving up lactate production. They're doing all these things to enhance muscle breakdown so that they can then enhance muscle recovery. And power lifters are also big. And there's some that look like bodybuilders, but they train entirely different. They train singles, doubles, triples, they take extremely long rest periods compared to the bodybuilders. So how do they grow, as well as how do the bodybuilders grow? And they're on different ends of the rep spectrum. And it's interesting to talk about. But one thing about the bodybuilders is that most of them at the highest levels, if not all of them, are taking drugs. They're running some gear. They're have all the different steroids and things, enhancements, and so they can recover quicker. But they also typically only train that 1 day a week type split. So like, a lot of athletes do this too. They have the back and bicep day, and then they'll train their chest and tricep day, and then they'll do a leg day, and then they'll do a shoulder day. Bodybuilders can get away with that because of all the drugs that they're on. And they do 15, 20 sets on that muscle group in that one single day, and they need 7 days to recover. Whereas if, as an athlete, if we really want to grow, we know that we need to hit, because we're probably natural, we're probably not on anabolic steroids and tren and all these other things. And so we want to hit the muscles at least 2 times per week. We need to have more stimulus every single week. And the gold standard is typically 10 sets per body group. So if you're trying to grow, per muscle group. So if you're trying to grow your, let's say you're trying to grow your chest, and you do chest on Monday, and you do say 5 sets, great. Do another 5 sets on Thursday. Or if you do, let's say you do 4 sets of an incline chest press and 2 to 4 sets of, flies or whatever. On Thursday, you do 4 sets of dips, and then 2 to 4 sets of, say, a flat bench press with dumbbells or something similar. We've hit that threshold of 10 sets, but we've done it in 2 different exposures. And we know that the amount of exposures per week for us natural athletes, us natural lifters, is more important than doing the bodybuilding split chest tries, back buys, legs, and so on. So I did want to touch on that. I'm glad you brought up the bodybuilding. Can we go into, let's go a little bit deeper now. Can we go into the 3 types of hypertrophy: myofibrillar, connective tissue hypertrophy, and sarcoplasmic?
Yeah, definitely.
Go ahead.
Jump into that.
Yeah, go ahead and start running with that.
So we did a pretty good job kind of talking about type 1 and type 2 muscle fiber hypertrophy, and that's kind of what we're talking about. We're talking the difference between bodybuilders growing muscle and athletes growing muscle is that myofibrillar hypertrophies, the myofibrils are the small pieces of actual muscle fiber that's growing. Bodybuilders tend to have more sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. So the sarcoplasm is what surrounds the cell, right, and the myofibrils are inside the sarcoplasm. So kind of what I think about is having a cup. And if you have straws in your cup, like I'm looking down at my cup right here, and someone who's doing more myofibrillar hypertrophy has the same size cup, but that cup is jam-packed full of straws, and right, all those straws are muscle fibers, versus someone who has more sarcoplasmic hypertrophy has a bigger cup with less straws in that cup. So the muscle looks bigger because the cell size is bigger, but that doesn't mean there's more muscle fibers inside that cell. And so when we're talking about different kinds of hypertrophy, that's kind of the difference between the type 1 muscle fiber growth, the type 2 muscle fiber growth, is how much actual muscle fiber growth are we getting versus how much cellular growth we're getting. And then for hypertrophy, for the connective tissue, it's really important to make sure we're loading the weight and having a higher intensity to help train the connective tissue, like the fascia and the tendon and the ligament, because it's actually really common for bodybuilders to get avulsion fractures. And an avulsion fracture is where the muscle rips off the bone, kind of like a green twig sort of snaps, and it kind of doesn't break off, but it kind of just pulls. Right. And so what the cause of that is the muscle is so strong because they've done so much targeted muscle growth, and the intensity was relatively light. So we're talking probably 40 to 60% intensity, which targets the muscle, but it doesn't give enough stimulus for the connective tissue to stay strong. And so the muscle ends up getting so much more overdeveloped is in comparison to the connective tissue, that the muscle pulls the connective tissue off the bone. And that's more common with bodybuilders than it is with like strength athletes, because we know that lower rep, higher intensity, and by intensity, I mean percentage of 1RM or load, higher intensity exercises trains more of the connective tissue, especially isometrics and eccentrics. But we know we're getting more connective tissue strength through that. So it's a lot more common to build more robust ligaments, tendons, and like fascia tissue from that from that higher intensity, lower rep type of training. So when we're talking those different types of muscle hypertrophy, we're talking about targeting type 2 fibers, type 1 fibers, or the connective tissue.
Yeah. And it's really important to note, Sean mentioned type 1 and type 2 fibers. And I'm not going to pull up the graph, but we've talked about it almost every episode about basketball is 60% in that ATP PCR system, 20% in the glycolytic system, and then 20% in the oxidative. So what that means is we're using type 2 fibers the vast majority of the game. You don't vertical jump slowly. You don't take a first step and try to beat a defender slowly. You don't, make defensive slide movements to try to keep the guy, dribbling the basketball in front of you slowly. These are all fast, quick, explosive movements. And those are all type 2 muscle fiber movements predominantly. And so we need to train them as such. And when we go heavier, the important thing to know, and it's out there in a study, and I can pull it up if anybody asks me for it, I can try and find it. They've shown that muscle failure is more important to hypertrophy than the actual rep range is.
Yep.
That's the reason why powerlifters can get big as well as bodybuilders can get big. Bodybuilders try to trash their body like we talked about. They create so much muscular damage. Powerlifters don't so much, but they are attempting the heaviest lifts almost every time. They're going, like I said, singles and doubles and triples, and these huge loads. They are going to failure quite often, and so that's going to contribute to hypertrophy more. So what I like to do with my athletes, and what I recommend for you, is at least 50% of your sets go to failure. Now, there's two types of failure, which a lot of people don't talk about. Technical failure, they talk about muscular failure. That's you trying to push a weight and your muscles literally don't go. Technical failure is 2 reps before that. You're twerking and spinning and twisting on the bench, okay? Your form went to shit. Your form is bad now. All right, bring it back. We want strict form every time. We want technical reps. We need you to rehearse the movement correctly, because movement precedes muscle. So do the movement correctly. Don't have that technical breakdown, that technical failure. Do the lift correctly, and then allow for muscular failure, though. Don't be that fish out of water squirming around, or those chin-ups where people are, looking like a fish out of water, okay? Have a technical proficiency with your lifts. But muscle failure is important. So 50% is what I shoot for when we're going for hypertrophy. Someone like Sean, who does a lot of Olympic lifting, he might do, doubles at 75%. It's not technically a true double, but he's also not working on hypertrophy in that lift. He's working on form, he's working on function, he's working on probably 1 or 2 specific things every time he's going after it. But we're talking about those presses, those rows, those chin-ups, those deadlifts, those squats. If you need to grow and if you want to grow, we got to take at least half of our sets to failure.
I'm with you on that. That's something that a lot of people don't quite realize. Regardless of the rep range, exactly what Phil said, the rep range is less important than it is the failure at the end of each rep range. And so that's why you can get big on bodybuilding doing 20 reps, 25 reps. But those 25 reps, they're grunting, they're stressed. At the end of that, they almost can't lift the weight. The same thing is, it's the same on the opposite end of the scale. I was doing like 80% back squats for, 4x4 yesterday, and I was struggling, and I almost didn't make my last rep. But it's the failure that is the most important part. So we're working on that. The stress level, the strain factor at the end of your set is almost more important to hypertrophy than the weight you're lifting. Because if you're lifting, 135 pounds on your bench press, but you did it 10 times, but we know that you could have done that 15 times, you haven't quite reached your threshold for hypertrophy because the strain factor, that stress level, wasn't inducing enough stress. It's a stress response. Your body responds to stress. We talk about all the time, the SAID principle. There's a specific adaptation to impose demand. And so the specific adaptation we're looking for is hypertrophy. Well, the demand for hypertrophy needs to be stress. It needs to be strain at whatever the rep level is and whatever the intensity level is. There is plenty of good research. One of my favorite Instagram accounts, it produces all research. He does a ton of infographics. It's Brad Schoenfield. We'll put it in the notes. I'll find it for you. But his whole Instagram is just infographics of hypertrophy and just reiterating the point that it's every rep range, you could potentially grow muscle based on the strain. What kind of muscle? Type 1, type 2, they're going to be different depending on the range that you're in, but they will absolutely grow.
You know, Schoenfeld is really the, you know, you hit the nail on the head. He is the king of hypertrophy. And we can put that in the comments and the notes below. But you mentioned reps, so I just wanted to bring this up. This is a very simple, you know, repetition continuum. We know that strength is typically around 1 to 5, traditional hypertrophy between 6 and 12, and local endurance or stamina is 12 plus. Again, in basketball, we need to be on this side of the spectrum. You can still grow down here, but failure needs to be there. And so what Schoenfeld, what I've heard him mention before and talk about is so hypertrophy is a dose relationship in response with volume. And so volume is just your overall amount of reps. If you take all of the sets times the amount of reps that you did in a workout, that's volume. The more your volume goes up, typically the more hypertrophy goes up. So you can do 3 sets of 10, which is kind of that, you know, traditional, you know, workout lifting, you know, level. 3 sets of 10 is 30 reps. Okay. You're working here in hypertrophy though. You're not really working in strength. You could also do 10 sets of 3, get a lot more hella strong. Okay. And you're still hitting that volume of 30 reps, but you're doing 10 sets of 3. So the weight that you're moving is much heavier because you can only do a certain amount of weight for 3 reps versus what you can do for 10 reps. So it's really important. It's a dose relationship with hypertrophy with volume. Okay, so your volume has to be there. We talked about 10 sets. I didn't say this part, but 10 sets is twice as productive for hypertrophy. It will create twice as much growth as opposed to if you just do 4 sets or 5 sets in a week on a specific muscle group. Now that sounds kind of easy. I mean, 10 is 5 times 2, but we just said, and Schoenfeld has shown it in his scientific studies and meta-analyses that there is that dose relationship with hypertrophy and volume. So get down here, go heavier. Again, 6 is fine. I think even 8, we talked about 6 to 8 earlier. But as you're in the season, as you're getting closer to the season, and you really want to start being more explosive and strong, we need to get down into that strength phase. And then we talked about, or Sean talked about earlier, muscle fiber type. It's important to know the different fiber type makeup of the different muscles. And that can be a very good thing when you're wanting to grow a specific muscle group. So for example, the biceps femoris is one of your hamstrings, and so is the semitendinosus and the semimembranosus. These are all fast twitch. Okay, they're all very strong muscles. If you look at the rectus abdominis, okay, the 6-pack, the front, the abdominals that you see, the rectus abdominis is fast twitch. Then why is everybody doing 20 reps and 30 reps and 40 reps of abdominals? When it's a fast twitch muscle, you need to train it as such. You need to train it in that fast twitch fiber type, which is down here more often. So when you're training your abs, as an example, train it according to its fiber type. Train it in heavier weight, lower reps. And the same goes for, as you can see, the majority of our body is fast twitch. And I can share this if anybody asks. I'm happy to do that. Sean, any thoughts on that?
You mentioned the 3 sets of 10 protocol.
Yeah.
That's, if you guys are interested in that, it's the DeLorme and Watkins protocol. That's from like the 60s was the study they did to study muscle hypertrophy. But the goal wasn't to do 3 sets of 10. The goal was to do 3 sets of maybe 10. So you do 3 by 8 one week, and then you failed there, and then you did 3 by 9 the next week, and then you worked up to 3 by 10, and that was the signal to say, hey, look, we accomplished this. Now let's change the stimulus. And so that reiterates the idea that we want to train to muscular failure for whatever the rep range was. You see a lot of people, they jump into a 3 by 10 rep scheme and they smash 10 and they just put the weight up and like, yep, cool, 3 by 10, I did it. But again, it doesn't quite match the intensity and the like reps to mechanical failure.
Right.
Speaking of mechanical failure, did you want to
Yeah.
get into mechanical tension and metabolic stress and muscle damage?
You read my mind. I was actually looking at that right now. Yeah. Let's talk about those three things. Go ahead.
So when we're looking at muscle hypertrophy, we're looking at muscle hypertrophy in 2 to 3 different ways, right? And so when we're thinking about growing, we have metabolic stress. We'll start there. So metabolic stress is using lower intensities and higher rep ranges. This is the predominant factor of how bodybuilders tend to increase their hypertrophy, is they use a lot more metabolic stress. And what that means is they're creating less muscle damage. And instead of creating muscle damage, they're increasing metabolites in the bloodstream. And the metabolites are buildup of lactate and hydrogen ions. And what they do is they create a low oxygen environment in the muscle. It's that burn you feel is the buildup of lactate and hydrogen. It's that the pump people seek is the buildup of metabolites. And so bodybuilding actually commonly has rep schemes in place to increase the metabolic stress. So things like drop sets, things like burnouts, those are things that are meant to increase the arterial blood flow into the muscle, but they reduce the venous return. So you're constantly pumping in blood, but you're doing so much work, you're not allowing the body to rest, and you're not allowing the body to clear the lactate and the metabolites. And so what ends up happening is you get this overflow of lactate and hydrogen ions, and they signal gene expression to the DNA to grow muscle, because you get a dose response of insulin growth factor, growth hormone, testosterone, and all the other hormones that increase protein synthesis. But we're doing this with a really low intensity. So, I mean, I can't do my 1RM 25 times. And so to do 25 reps, I have to be probably my 40 to 50% of my 1RM. And so there are benefits to this. One of the benefit is it is not creating as much muscle damage. And so what we're seeing now with professional athletes, especially for in-season athletes, stuff like blood flow restriction training or blood occlusion training, or at least anybody in the gym with like a tourniquet type thing on their body, what they're trying to do is they're creating pressure at the like proximal origination of a limb. And what that does is it allows the blood from your heart to pump into the muscle, but you cut it off and you don't let the blood leave. And so what you're doing is you're constantly filling with blood, more metabolites, which is going to get a bigger response of that, like we talked about, the insulin growth factor, the growth hormone, testosterone, and some of those other hormones that increase protein synthesis. And so like BFR bands are common right now. Tourniquets are common. There's a Katsu machine that'll, it's got a little box, and it's about a 7 out of 10 pressure is like the layman's term for it, but it's actually trying to measure your blood pressure. It'll actually measure your blood pressure, and then it'll cut off to a specific point of blood pressure. But there's lots of really good research on BFR. Again, the main component of it is building up these metabolites and these hormones, but it plays into, because I'm not damaging the muscle to grow, I'm increasing hormones to grow. And so that is pretty big when we're talking about in-season athletes. I don't want to have muscle damage, because that's typically where you're going to get the soreness and the delayed onset muscle soreness. The DOMS comes from a lot of muscle damage. Yep. And so we can grow muscle in that low weight range. And then also, as a side effect, if I do workouts to fatigue, I burn out my type 1 muscle fibers. They've used up their energy. Well, if I'm continuously trying to do more reps, I might increase my uptake of type 2 muscle fibers to assist those burnt out and fatigued type 1 muscle fibers. So there is a little bit of type 2 muscle activation when doing this blood flow restriction, which can aid in the muscular growth. It might not be the major reason, but it is another reason. Yeah. So the metabolic stress, again, it's more hormonal change, which is very different than what we'll talk about next is mechanical stress. And so mechanical stress is quite the opposite. So mechanical stress it's basically muscle damage, right? And so this happens when we're lifting heavier weights. Higher weight equals higher protein degradation. And what I'm doing, why that's a good thing is because when I degrade the muscle protein, actually turns on the system to increase protein synthesis. Your body's like, hey, I need that muscle. What are you doing? Don't degrade my muscle protein. And it kicks on protein synthesis to help you grow. So mechanical stress is using a higher weight, lower reps. This is the power lifters. This is the weight lifters. This is your strength power athletes. They're using this mechanical stress to increase muscle growth by damaging the muscle itself. And so there are two different types of muscle growth. There's a third in there. I don't have the info pulled up on a third one. It's similar to mechanical stress, but the mechanical stress is going to be, so you get just muscle damage. Yeah. So that mechanical stress induces
and metabolic stress.
Yeah, induces muscle damage. And that muscle damage is kind of micro tears in the muscle. When you're straining, the muscle fibers are getting damaged, but that damage to the muscle is what signals the DNA to grow new muscle. You know, anything out of that, Phil?
Well, I just wanted to go a step further too. So you mentioned like the three ways. There's three types of hypertrophy, which we kind of covered: myofibrillar, connective tissue, and sarcoplasmic. 70% of muscle is that myofibrillar protein. So that should be kind of if we're trying to grow, that's going to be our biggest bang for our buck, because we're trying to hit the myofibrillar protein, the myofibrillar hypertrophy. 20% sarcoplasmic, and then 10% is actually the mitochondrial proteins. Yeah, gotta love the mitochondria. Side note of mitochondria, did you know that our mitochondria in the human body peaks at the age of 9?
I did not know that.
After that, it's downhill, and I'm like, God, why'd you do that to us? Like, why do we have to, like no wonder kids are always like bouncing around and high energy.
They have all the oxygen to the blood. They never run out of energy. That's funny.
A cool thing about, you mentioned protein synthesis, lactate production. Lactate production increases protein synthesis. It will help your muscles grow big and strong. Lactate production actually also increases testosterone and growth hormone. And because of that, because of the growth hormone production, it helps aid in fat loss much more efficiently than a cardio would do. That's a side note. So that burning is a good thing. That lactic acid buildup, that's a good thing. That helps produce bigger, stronger muscles. You want to go into rep schemes and kind of some things that we like to do?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Let's get into the fun stuff.
Yeah, so like we talked about, I mean, Coach Sean and I both love strength. I mean, anything over 8 for me is like an endurance set. I think, and for Sean, anything over 4 or 5, it's like, gosh, I need to sit down for a minute and nap.
It's tough.
But remember, failure is the most important part. Some of my favorite growth rep schemes. First one that came to mind when I was writing these down: 6-12-25. 6-12-25 is hugely successful. Charles Poliquin made it really popular because it drives such a high amount of growth hormone. So you do basically the same muscle group and you typically go faster each exercise with no rest in between. So let's say we're training the posterior chain. We may do let's say a deadlift for 6, okay? You have no more than 15 seconds, and then you're gonna go over and do a second exercise for 12. So you could say maybe, let's say a horizontal back extension for 12. And then for 25, I don't know. I mean, if we're talking explosive stuff, you could do a kettlebell swing, but I would probably maybe back away from that. I would say, let's say 6 reps, deadlift, 12 reps, horizontal back extension, 25 reps for first hyper. Yeah, or what'd you say?
Glute bridges.
Yeah, 25 reps, 45-degree back extension, because it's hitting it at a different part of the strength curve, or the length tension curve, like Sean likes to call it. So that's one example. Another example, 6-12-25. Let's say we do 6 dips, and then we go into 12 chest presses, and we could do that. And then 25 incline dumbbell presses. So we're hitting chest, chest, chest. Again, you only get 15 seconds or so in between. You're hitting different angles. So you're getting the clavicular and the sternal head of the pecs. So there's a lot of good things in there, but that's one of my favorites. Why don't we go like ping pong back and forth? So why don't you go, Sean?
Drop sets I like, and I like exercises that induce metabolic damage. And so with the drop set, the idea is to keep the blood in the muscle. And so we're looking at doing, let's just say we're doing bicep curls, because why not? And so I'm going to drop set. I'm going to grab the 20-pound dumbbells, and I'm going to crush 20. I'm going to grab whatever reps I can do with the 20s, put them back. Then I'm going to grab a weight lower, maybe the 15-pound dumbbells, and I'm going to crush 15-pound dumbbell bicep curls, put those back when I fail. And I'm dropping the reps down, or I'm keeping the reps high as I'm dropping the weight down. But this is more of a burnout. This is more of that metabolic stress that we're talking about. This is ways to increase decrease the oxygen in the muscle, which increases the ischemia, hypoxia, and builds a lot of that lactate and builds a lot of that metabolic stress. So the drop sets, I feel like, are really common in bodybuilding. It's the 21s, you got the upper half the curl, the bottom half the curl, and then the full curl, and your arms are exploding. But that's that pump that everyone's chasing, is that metabolic stress. So I think the drop sets are a really good way to induce that.
Another one that I like is rest pause. And rest pause is similar to drop sets, but you keep the weight the same. So for example, you could go 5-3-2 or 6-4-4. But what you are doing is allowing, so let's say we do 5-3-2, okay, or let's say 5-3-3. So you do 5 reps of a specific exercise. You only get 10 to 15 seconds rest, and then you do 3, the exact same weight, and then 10 to 15 seconds rest, and you do 3 more reps. So if you add those all up, that's 11 reps. Because of the intra-set rest, you actually can do more weight for those 11 reps than you would if you didn't rest at all. So that's a way to trick the body. And unsimilar to drop sets, it's actually more, it's more easy on the nervous system. So I tend to use drop sets only after I've done rest pause a few times with clients who are new, who've never done those things, because it's just so demanding on the drop sets. Rest pause is kind of a good step to those drop sets. So again, some of my favorites with rest pause are 5-3-3, 6-4-4, and 8-6-6. And so, like I said, again, let's say you're doing let's say a close grip bench press for triceps. You do 6 reps, rack the bar, count to 10, unrack the bar, 4 reps, count to 10, unrack the bar, 4 reps again. And by that 4th rep, 3rd and 4th rep on that second set of 4, you should be really grinding. So that's another one of my favorites. Sean, you got another one?
Yeah, eccentrics for 10 to 12 reps. One of my favorite ways to grow muscle is that eccentric, that negative, that lengthening contraction. So a bicep curl is when the arm stretches, it pulls the muscle. And eccentric contraction actually causes a lot of mechanical stress and muscle damage. The way the muscle protein from that eccentric contraction, you're literally ripping the muscle fiber cross bridge off its attachment point. So you actually kind of rip the muscle away from its binding site, which does increase that mechanical stress. I like 10 to 12 reps, 3 to 4 seconds on that eccentric, really common bodybuilding scheme. But again, we're stronger eccentrically by about 110 to 120% of our 1RM eccentric. So I've even done times where I'll do an assisted concentric, or like say I'm doing a bench press, I'll help you up on your bench press and I'm going to let you just lower down. Really common. I like to do it with pull-ups. So I'll grab a box and set you up at the top of your pull-up position and just let you go slow negative, jump back up there or get back on the box and just focus on that negative. Is a really good way to get mechanical tension in a really safe manner, because I'm not overloading a poor rep scheme on a concentric. All I got to do is lower it down. So I'm stronger by doing that. It gives me really good mechanical stress, and it's pretty safe to do. And you're going to get I like the 10 to 12 rep scheme on that. Again, it keeps us under our stamina building zone. It keeps us kind of right in the middle of that hypertrophy zone. But again, 3 to 4 seconds on an eccentric, it'll change your life.
Yeah. I don't like to go too deep into the weeds because I'm trying to respect the audience and where their level is, but you mentioned that sarcomere, and we talked earlier about sarcoplasmic hypertrophy as one of the 3 ways of hypertrophy. And what I didn't know for the longest time, so we have the sarcomeres, is that the eccentric load, or the eccentric when the muscle is lengthening. So as you lower it slowly, I've talked about time under tension before and how it's important to have slower tempos most of the time in your training, and how eccentric strength is important for change of direction, speed, and injury prevention. Eccentric strength actually increases sarcomeres in series, so this way, and the concentric increases sarcomeres parallel with each other. So don't think for a second that the eccentric isn't important. You are missing a portion of growth, of hypertrophy, if you're not slowly lowering that weight before driving it up fast. I thought that was really interesting that the sarcomeres grow this way, but also grow this way. Eccentric is in series and concentric is in parallel. Let's give one more each because I want to get this one. I love. So as a side note to 6, 12, 25, if you want to go heavier, like we mentioned, we like heavier. You can go 3, 6, 12. You can cut them all in half and have it be the same thing. Do 3 reps and then 6 reps and then 12 reps. So you could do like 3 reps of a lying hamstring curl and then 6 deadlifts and then 12 back extensions. Something like that would be a wonderful, wonderful series for your posterior chain for your backside. But my last rep range I want to talk about is wave loading. And wave loading is one of my favorites for peaking. So as you're getting closer to the season, as you're getting ready for your competition, whatever it may be a tournament, and you can wave load different reps. So you could do 5-3-1, you could do 3-2-1, you could do 7-5-3, 10-8-6. My favorite for basketball is 7-5-3. So you're going to do 6 sets. You're going to do 7 reps on the first set, then 5 reps on the second set, and then 3 reps, and then go and do it all over again. So 7-5-3, 7-5-3. And what happens is you're basically tricking the nervous system. You're building up the weight each set. So let's say you do 7 reps of a bench press at 200, let's just say 100 kilos. And then 5 reps you can do, let's say 210 kilos. And then 3 reps you can do 220 kilos or 120 kilos. When you go back to that 7, you will be able to do more because you've potentiated your nervous system. So that second 7, you might even be able to get the weight that you did for 5, but at least you'll be able to go up. So in that first 7, you did 100. The second 7, you may do 105. And in that second 5, you can do maybe 115 instead of the 110 you did the first time. And then the third, or the set of 3, maybe you get 125 kilos. So you set basically a new benchmark for yourself because you've primed the nervous system. And like we talked about earlier, 6 to 8 is that functional hypertrophy. So you have the 7s, but then you also have 2 sets of 5 and 2 sets of 3. So you're getting into that strength. You're getting into that powerful, big, strong type 2B muscle fibers. As long as the weight is right, as long as the load is right, you'll be able to still grow, yet also become stronger for the game of basketball. And I think 7-5-3 wave loading is maybe my favorite rep scheme. Sean, what do you have? Your last one.
Implement. So if any of you guys have heard of a Katsu machine, you probably have, unless you play pro basketball and been exposed to like some high level training facilities. They might have a Katsu machine or something that looks like it's on a cart and you strap it up to your arm or your leg and it puts pressure on your arm. Some people use a tourniquet or like literally something that they'll use in the hospital. They'll tie it around your arm, tie it off, and you see the vein pop. So that's tourniquet style training, which mimics the blood flow restriction. And that BFR, that blood flow restriction, again, is another metabolic type training. But there's a study done by C.S. Fry et al. And blood flow restriction training stimulates mTOR, which is one of the major hormones for growth and protein synthesis.
Yep.
And testosterone, but signaling in muscle protein synthesis is increased in older men doing blood flow restriction training. So if you guys can simulate either with a Katsu machine or a occluded, like a tourniquet band for that, again, at a 7 out of 10 on the pressure, you can mimic that hypoxic and ischemic environment, that low oxygen. I used a Katsu machine. One of my buddies, when we were going through grad school, got loaned a Katsu machine so he could do his research with it. It's the craziest thing. It measures your blood pressure. It occludes your arm or leg. The cuffs are super comfy. And then it occludes. And then what you do essentially is if you're wearing something like that, you do a burnout set of like 20 to 30 reps. He gave me 5-pound dumbbells to do bicep curls with. And after I had the thing on my arms, the very first rep felt like I had already done 25 bicep curls. It was instantly an insane burn, and it just was miserable the whole time. But you're using 5-pound dumbbells. So it's like, hey, your muscle's not going to be damaged. You're just going to feel really weird afterwards. And so something like that, a tool that mimics ischemia, I like. I'm finding out, Phil, as we're talking, all my hypertrophic methods that I just mentioned were all like on the type 1 metabolic stress side of hypertrophy, because we talked about my whole training. Every time I train, I do like less than 4 reps. And so I really don't do a lot of hypertrophy. And so personally for me, when I do hypertrophy, I like to do more of the metabolic demand, because I get so much mechanical stress doing my squats, deadlifts, my Olympic work. I'm literally, as we're talking, I'm finding this out. All my techniques were all metabolic.
Yeah.
But for you guys that are strength power athletes, this is good, because you can do those high metabolic demands with less stress on the muscle, which saves you from being, you're going to be sore if it's new to you. Obviously, just anything new is sore, but because there's not as much protein degradation on those higher rep schemes, you're not damaging the muscle. You don't have to recover from that as much. You don't have a limitation to your performance, because you're still be able to be explosive. You might be a little sore, but you're not reducing your force producing characteristics. And so I was just telling Phil before we started, I think it's the Rockets. I can't be certain. I got to double check, but there's actually a few NBA teams that are using the Katsu training device in season to maintain muscle mass, because it doesn't damage the muscle fiber.
Yeah, that's smart. That's really smart. And you mentioned it just dawned on me too. I didn't go back to the, I think it's important to note and to share with these basketball players the easiest time, the easiest place, the easiest way to grow. And I mentioned the 3 things, the 3 simple things that eat, sleep, and train. The best time to do it is immediately the first training block of the off season. And it's very important not to play basketball at that time. I mentioned, that's why a lot of guys lose weight during the season, because they're burning so many calories and they can't consume the amount to replace what they're burning, because we burn, 600 to 1,000 calories every hour of basketball. It's important to let your joints rest. You guys won't forget how to dribble a basketball. You guys won't forget how to jump high and dunk. You guys won't forget how to drop step, all these things. Get off the court for 4 to 6 weeks. Focus on your training, all right? You have to eat in a caloric surplus. I made a video for this. If you want it, just comment below mass. I'll be happy to share it with you. But you have to eat in a caloric surplus. You have to train hard. I like 2 exposures a week. So upper body Monday, Thursday, lower body Tuesday, Friday. You're getting 2 exposures of all your muscle groups, all your body parts twice a week. And the most important thing, you have to sleep enough. And typically it's 9 hours. That's the goal. If you want to grow, you break down the muscle, you do the damage during the training, you feed it with the food, and then you grow during the sleep. It couldn't be any simpler. And I pulled up all these, and then I forgot I wanted to share them. Let's just share the whole screen. So these are some of my athletes that I worked with. This guy's playing Division I in Russia, and he's doing a damn good job this year. He's a starter. He was on the Lithuanian under-20 national team for a long time. You can see his shoulders, just how much bigger he got. Look at his posture. Definitely got hypertrophy in the beard. Significant gains. He put on 5.5 kilos in about 6 weeks. He was up about 11.5 pounds. Another guy, Scott Deal, he put on 10 pounds in 8 weeks. Okay. So 10 pounds in 8 weeks. So it is doable. One of my favorite guys to work with, Ovidius Galdakis, his last year was Division I in Spain. He put on 8 kilos in just 7 weeks. So over a kilo a week, 18 pounds. The California sunshine didn't hurt his body at all there. There's me. We won't go into that. This gal gained muscle and lost body fat. She wanted to do a fitness competition. This gal too. This gal she lost, gosh, it was only 4 weeks. And she dropped and then, just looked fabulous. There's Ovi. Yeah, that was the last. So at the end of this, he signed with New York, with the Knicks for the Las Vegas Summer League, and did a great. It was Kristaps Porzingis rookie year, so he didn't get a whole lot of run, but he had a look in the NBA. And then after this, he got a tryout with the LA Clippers. So adding muscle can definitely work. Can definitely help you. He trained with that other guy, Agardis, and at the time they were both like, especially Ovi was like, I can't believe how much bigger I am, yet how much faster I feel, how much more explosive I feel. And it's because we were, like we talked about, using all those type 2 fibers, getting them strong, getting them more explosive. But he was eating enough, he was sleeping enough. We were off the court for most of that time, so it was a perfect environment to grow. And that's my parting thought. Sean, do you have any parting thoughts?
Make sure your rep scheme's hard. Just don't undersell your weight for your rep scheme. That's the most important thing. Hypertrophy, you got to be struggling on your last rep, whatever the rep scheme is, just strain factor.
Yeah. So I was talking to a guy in the group the other day. He messaged me and he was doing, gosh, what was it? It was something like I can do 50 kilos overhead press. So for 10 reps, I'm doing 12 kilos. And I was like, no, you're not going to grow. Because again, like Sean said, the reps have to match the weight. If you're trying to do 10 and you get to 10 and you say, I could have done 14, it's too light. You should be grinding on that last 1 or 2 reps. Reps and weight have to match. Sean, I love that. Couldn't be better to part with on a hypertrophy day. Thank you so much for that. Until next week, hope you guys all have beard gains as well, like Sean and I. And if there's any questions on hypertrophy, or if you want to see that video I made the other day for mass, just comment mass below, and I'll be happy to do that and share that with you. Sean, what's your website?
SeanDoesStrength.com.
SeanDoesStrength.com. You can check me out at GetPartStrength.com and on YouTube. And until next week, go get big.
Get big.